I would like to invite Mr. Jagjit Mahabal, Business Valuation Methods, Importance and Advantages of SMEs. Sir, can I please have you here? Thank you.
I think half the hall is still empty. I'll try and make sure whatever the remaining half present, it's not too technical and jargonish for them. And try and, as far as possible, try and retain their interest. Post-lunch sessions are always very difficult. And I have been sent as an opening batsman. So even more difficult task. Nevertheless, I'm going to talk about the framework of valuation in India. What are the different methods of valuation and what are the approaches utilized or used by valuation experts in valuing businesses. Another very important topic, startup valuation and valuation of intangibles. Intangibles is an integral part of valuation of the overall business. And last but not the least, connecting it with the SME segment as such. What is the importance for the SME segment?
This light, nothing is visible actually. So what you are showing in the screen, you can't read it all.
And the valuation of the business, or the value that they are creating, and what are the advantages for it. Okay, starting. So this is a typical page in Economic Times, which is dedicated to business valuation. And if you see some of the news, well, valuation game is really hot in India currently. In about few months' time, in the year FY 2021, there are 35 companies which have turned unicorns in India. What is a unicorn? A unicorn is any company which is having a valuation of $1 billion or more. Okay, so 35 Indian companies have become unicorns. You've seen the kind of crazy valuations that companies like Zomato or Nykaa have gone through their IPOs, have received through their IPOs. What I would like to really talk about with specific focus on the SME segment is that they need to be more value conscious. They need to think like unicorns. They certainly need to be more value conscious and understand what is the overall valuation game and how it is done. Okay, let's understand quickly what is the meaning of valuation. So here are some definitions. I'll just quickly read out one or two there. One of them, not more than one. So business valuation is the process of determining the fair economic value of a whole business or company unit. Okay, there are a few other bullet points which basically will help in explaining the concept of valuation and how it is done. Again, a very famous definition by Warren Buffett: price is what you pay, value is what you get. We often use the term value, but it's important to understand the meaning in the right perspective. People also use the terms price and cost along with value very interchangeably, but each of these terms have different meanings. Another important thing is valuation is a subjective process. You put two valuers in the same room, they will never come up with the same valuation for a particular asset or for a particular business. Why so? Because it's not an exact science. It is a science in a certain way, but it's also an art. So everybody's perspective differs, and that's how valuers come with different valuations for businesses. But having said that, it's important to understand and know the value of the business. In India, since last few years, about 4 to 5 years, a very robust regulatory and process framework is being created, is progressing well in India for the valuation profession. Okay, before we go on to valuation activity and how it is done, I would just like to make some concepts clear of value itself, and there are these different terminologies which are used in the overall valuation process. I'm sure you have read all these definitions, but we can take a quick recap. Intrinsic value is a true and real value of an asset in the eyes of the investor. Very important differentiation when a valuation exercise comes into picture, and that is called as the valuation basis. It's called going concern value or liquidation value. So what is the going concern value? The going concern value is the valuation of a business, assuming that it is a sustainable business. It's going to remain in active condition or sustainable for a certain period of time, or in certain cases even for perpetuity. Whereas a liquidation value is what? A value of a business, if it shuts down and all assets are sold at current levels in an orderly, either in an orderly or a forced manner. If it's a forced manner, it's a distress sale or distress valuation. Concept of fair value is more of an accounting concept. Price of an asset in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement date. Okay, and then there are other concepts of investment value, synergistic value. I wouldn't want to get into jargons, as I said, being a post-lunch session. Okay, now let's quickly look at the purposes of valuation. Why is it that companies or businesses need valuation? And I've kind of segmented them. The first segment is valuation for transactions. So very importantly, whenever there is fundraising through equity, whenever there is business purchase or sale, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, buybacks, leverage buyouts, management buy-ins, successions, ESOPs, each time of these transactions, companies and businesses need to do valuation. Sometimes mandatorily, sometimes through prudence or a management decision, or a wise management decision. Another purpose of valuation is valuation for statutory compliances. In India, under different statutes, whether it is tax laws, whether it is RBI, FEMA regulations, whether it is SEBI requirements, or even Companies Act, there is a valuation of the business or the company is required to be done mandatorily. And I've shown a chart showing the transactions or scenarios in which the valuation needs to be carried out as per the statutory laws in India. Valuation is obviously required for financial reporting, fair value accounting. Okay, another two of the important segments of purposes of valuation. Valuation for litigations. Valuations for court cases. Many times we encounter these situations in businesses. Of late, many times more with the IBBI and IBC code coming into picture. Valuation is obviously required every time there is a bankruptcy or insolvency procedure happening. There are ownership disputes, there are contractual disputes. There are scenarios or situations where there are dissenting or oppressive shareholders go into litigations, and there are disputes related to intellectual property rights or any other disputes. Every time there is a business valuation required to be done. Last but not the least, and I would definitely like to stress upon this requirement of purpose of valuation more for the SMEs. They need to undergo and do a valuation exercise and understand the value and the drivers of the value of the business for a better planning of the business, strategic planning of the business. So businesses need to do valuation or recommended to do valuation whenever there is a strategic planning exercise happening in the business, whenever there is a mergers and acquisitions planning happening, estate or wealth planning is happening, or even personal financial planning happening for that matter. Okay, I know it's a little cluttered chart, but there's no one way of showing everything that is important about the regulatory framework in India in one slide. I don't want to go in multiple slides. So, I don't want to read all that. What I'll tell you is that in India, this is the overall scene as far as the regulatory framework for valuation is concerned. So there are four quadrants here, or sections: Companies Act and IBC on one side, the Income Tax Act, FEMA or RBI regulations, and the SEBI. And let's look at the valuation authority. Who is authorized to do valuation under each of these regulations. Under Companies Act and IBC, it has to be mandatorily a registered valuer. Registered valuer is someone who is a finance professional and has passed the examination of registered valuation. It's a new enactment which has come under the Companies Act in year 2017. And there are multiple situations in which the Companies Act recommends companies or requires companies to do valuations. This has to be done only through registered valuer. The transactions could be fresh issue, preferential allotment, private placement, buybacks, issue of convertible instruments, bonds, ESOPs, sweat equity, liquidation processes. Under each of these transactions, under Companies Act, it is mandatory for the companies to do valuation. Under Income Tax Act, it's allowed to be done by either a chartered accountant or a merchant banker, depending on which situation it is. I'll not go into details. But again, the transactions are issue of shares by a private limited company, issue of shares, transfer of intangibles in transfer pricing under the Income Tax Act, receipt of properties without consideration, transfer of unquoted shares without consideration. All these situations, valuation is required for that. Under FEMA, I'll not read it out. You can read it out possibly after the lights are corrected now. But under FEMA, I think what is important is at the time of every FDI, companies need to do valuation. And also at the same time, at the time of every ODI, overseas direct investment, that is Indian companies investing abroad, there is a requirement of valuation. Under SEBI, valuation is carried out by merchant bankers. And again, the transactions are pretty much similar. Fresh issue of shares, preferential allotments, regulations under SEBI's takeover code, ESOPs, sweat equity, and exit opportunities under EAC. Okay, so far so good. What I'm going to talk about is, again, the slide looks a little crowded, but there was no way to explain the different valuation methods in one slide, given the paucity of time. Okay, what is more important is when valuers, registered valuers, either it is the registered valuers or the merchant bankers, when they carry out a valuation of a business, they primarily use three different methods, or one of the three methods. Okay. As per international valuation standards as well, there are three main methods of carrying out a business valuation. And what are those three methods? It's either a asset or cost-based valuation, or income-based valuation. It's also called earnings-based valuation in the Western world, or market-based valuation. And depending on the different dynamics or factors at play, the valuer uses his best judgment to use one method or select the most relevant method for valuation. At times, it can also be a combination of two methods. So there is a weighted average of values under two different methods is taken into consideration by a valuer to come out with his exercise of business value. So what is asset or cost-based valuation? It is mainly used for very early stage businesses, which doesn't have done any major business or any business for that matter, or businesses which are going for liquidation, where you just need to take into account the cost incurred for setting up of the business or the assets minus liabilities that you have in business. Market-based, most recommended under the income tax, under the international valuation standards or any valuation standards, because market gives the best estimate of the value. So the most important principle is whenever there is a market quote or a market price available, it has to be taken as value or valuation on a most priority basis, rather than any other method. So what are the different methods under market-based valuations? It is either a market price. For listed companies, you have stock market price. So that becomes a straight way of calculation of valuation of a company or a business or the equity. Or otherwise, if there is no direct quote, listed quote available, then there are other mechanisms like comparable company. Compare a company which is similar to your business and use the multiples, whether it is the PE multiple or the EBITDA multiple or the revenue multiple, to carry out the valuation of the company. or it could be comparable transaction as well, in the market. Now I'll come to the last, income based, which is very dear to me, and I think which is also dear to most of the valuation professionals, including the valuation guru Ashwath Damodaran. So, what is a business? A business basically is the infrastructure and the and a compilation of assets with a wherewithal and capability to generate future cash flows. So, how do you value a business? You can value a business only by understanding and calculating in some methodical manner the cash flows that the business is going to generate in future, and that is the best estimate of a value of a business. The present value of those cash flows is the value of the business, and this is the most popular method of valuation across the world and also in India. What are the different types of valuation under income based? It is either capitalization of earnings. So take earnings of a particular year, which is a normal year, which is not influenced by any issues or problems for the business. It's a normal profit which is sustainable for a future, and you use a capitalized factor for calculating the value of the business. Or it can be discounted cash flow, where you do a projection of a business for the next 4 to 5 years or even 10 years at times, and really calculate the cash, the real cash the business is generating from the business year on year, and use the discounted value cash flow technique for calculating the value. There are other methods like dividend discount model and all that, and I will not get into details. The bottom line is, market based is used when market data is available. Income based valuation methods are used when it is based on future expected earnings, and asset or cost based is used for early stage or liquidating companies. Now you would have seen that the most common method of doing a valuation is income based. So in order to be able to accurately or more accurately calculate the ability of a business to generate future cash flows, many times it's important to calculate or do the valuation of intangibles as well. So I've just listed few examples of intangibles here. Intangibles can be segmented as market-related intangibles, customer-related, artistic, contract-based, or technology-based. And it's a job of a valuer to carry out valuation of intangibles using different methods. Again, essentially the methods remain same, which we saw or which I explained in the previous slide. But different dynamics come into picture depending on what type of intangible asset it is. Okay, another very important hot topic currently is startup valuation. You would have seen the kind of values that the startups in India are regularly getting since last few years, and they are turning into unicorns. Startup valuation is a very difficult exercise, there are many challenges, and the key challenges in a startup valuation is there is no historical data available. So the main challenges are there is a lack of financial data. There is uncertainty on the discount rate that one needs to use while doing the discounting of cash flow. There are uncertainty of revenues. While there are some challenges, there are some factors which go into making the valuation at a premium valuation of certain startups, and which is on the basis of parameters like what is the kind of traction that the startup is getting, what is the reputation of the founders, prototype, availability, revenues already in place, supply and demand situations, distribution network or channel for companies. And also, these are the different factors which lead to a premium valuation of startups. And likewise, on the other hand, there are factors like hotness of the industry. Where if it's a poor industry, it has low margins, it has stiff competition within the industry. there's no track record of the management. Product is, not very good. Something which can be easily replicated. So in such situations, the valuations are often happen at discount. Again, there are different methods of doing startup valuations. Burger scorecard. I won't get into details of it. These methods basically try and analyze the strength of startup businesses on different parameters and try to assign value to a startup. So this in general is the overall scene of valuation or business valuations. When we say business valuation, it is either an enterprise valuation or the valuation of the owner's interest. When I say owner's interest, it means equity. So whenever somebody talks about valuation, it could be either an enterprise value, which is the overall value of the business, including its liabilities, or a value of a share or shareholders valuation. Okay, so I'll go to my last slide. From an SME perspective, what are the different factors which are important and advantages for SMEs to know and understand the valuation of their business, and it's recommended for them to carry out this exercise. So I'll just read out some of the circumstances, like to set a basis of value for business when no valuation has been done previously. To understand the real worth of the business. Everybody should be, I'm sure, is extremely interested in knowing the worth of his or her business. So therefore, it's recommended to carry out a valuation exercise of a business. Ultimately, the key objective of any business is, as we say, one of the key objectives is shareholders' wealth maximization. And how do we come to know that we have been able to create and maximize wealth? It is only through valuation exercise. Some of the other advantages or important factors are, you can plan a better exit strategy. You can do a proper valuation of the portfolio of intellectual properties. You can get bank financing. You can get private equity or venture capital investments. And to determine the intrinsic value for business and assets, where it is different from a peer. So there are multiple situations. So the bottom line is, as I said, when the SMEs are creating wealth and creating value, it's important for them to know how they can maximize the wealth and value for themselves. So I would strongly recommend a valuation exercise for the SMEs. That's about it. Thanks for patient listening after lunch. Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to move ahead with the event, and the next guest I would like to invite is Mr. Ajit Shah, Director, Universal Connections, and the topic he'll be speaking on is Emerging Export Markets for SMEs, Opportunity, Trends and Challenges.
Protocol and try to come between, I think, so that you don't sleep. Well friends, the topic given to me is trend, strength and your future. The most important thing, I think, what all of you deserve is that you stayed back after the lunch. Give a big clap for yourselves. Because you all have a reason to go back. Not that you don't have a work, but you thought that sitting in the conference hall with us perhaps will give a little more value addition rather than going back and doing your routine filing and routine signature. So responsibility for all three of us speakers is that we should fulfill that obligation which you have imposed on us. Trend, future trend for the export is extremely. मैं जब छोटा था तभी एक कहानी सुना करता था, आप लोगों ने भी सुनी होगी। कहानी में कहते थे एक गरीब ब्राह्मण था, एक गांव था, वो गांव में एक गरीब ब्राह्मण था और वहां पर एक अमीर बनिया का लड़का था। मुझे आज तक समझ में नहीं आता है कि ब्राह्मण गरीब क्यों था। एसएमई का भी वैसे ही है, कहां पर भी जाएंगे तो एसएमई उनके पास में पैसा नहीं है, एसएमई उसके पास में रिसोर्सेस नहीं है, एसएमई उनको प्रॉब्लम है। ये क्यों? एक कहानी है। मुझे कॉन्फिडेंस है कि हमारे एसएमई में इतनी ताकत है, इतनी ताकत है, इतनी ताकत है कि यदि वो चाहे ये इंपॉर्टेंट है, यदि वो चाहे तो वो कुछ भी कर सकते हैं। तो आउटसाइडर कैन स्टॉप योर ग्रोथ एंड प्रोग्रेस टेम्पररीली। द ओनली पर्सन हु स्टॉप्स योर ग्रोथ इज योरसेल्फ। आपकी सोच और पांव की मोच, ये दो ही चीज है जो आपको आगे ले जाने में रुकावट करती है। तो फायदा क्या, तो करना क्या है, हम हमारी सोच बदलिए। हमें एक्सपोर्ट्स में जाना है। एक्सपोर्ट इज अ ह्यूज मार्केट। एक सिंपल सा एग्जांपल दे दूं। कुछ लकी लोग यहां पर होंगे जिनके ग्रैंडफादर अभी जिंदा होंगे। हाउ मेनी ऑफ यू आर देयर हैविंग अ ग्रैंडफादर ओवर हियर? वेरी फ्यू विल बी देयर बिकॉज ऑफ योर एज। बट यदि आप उनके साथ बैठ के उनको पूछिए कि जब वो, मतलब आज से 50-60 साल पहले आपको छोटे से देहात में से आते होंगे, आज आप बॉम्बे में सेट हुए, आपका जो रूट्स है, आपका जो बेसिक्स है, वो कोई छोटा सा गांव होगा। वो टाइम आज से 100 years बिफोर, 70-80 years बिफोर, वो गांव के अंदर कोई इतनी अपॉर्चुनिटीज नहीं होगी। आपके ग्रैंडफादर ने किसी भी वजह से देहात छोड़ने का डिसीजन लिया और बाजू के गांव में या शहर में आ गए, तो क्या हुआ? उसका नतीजा ये हुआ, उसके बाद की 2 जनरेशन, मतलब आप आज इतने प्रोग्रेसिव, आज सक्सेसफुल है। वही टाइम पे आपके पिताजी, आपके दादा, उनके बाजू के नेबर, उन्होंने गांव छोड़ना नहीं, वहां ही रह गए। आज आप उनके देखेंगे तो आपको पता चलेगा कितना डिफरेंस है। मैसेज इज वेरी क्लियर। इफ यू वांट टू ग्रो, यू हैव टू मूव and move to a bigger market. Very simple management का rule है. I teach management in the colleges, MBAs. The fundamental principle is that it is a market size which decides your growth. If you wanted to grow, if you wanted to increase your business, if you wanted to go up, then yes, you have to move to the global market. It's a market where the volume is a substantial. You will not have a problem of sales, you will not have a problem of all this. Many times, I was doing a program in St. James College. Somebody asked me, is it export difficult? Very common question. And I have standardized my answer. I said, no, export is not difficult, but export is different. That difference, the day you digest, you understand each MSME, each manufacturer is quite capable of being successful in export. So what is to be done? There should be some recipe, there should be some roadmap. The first and foremost, there are 7 steps, but with the passage of time, I'll just restrict to 1 or 2. The first and foremost, what is required is the knowledge. You should have information. Lucky enough you people are that today information is easily available to you. सब लोग लगे नहीं होते, बहुत लोग ऐसे हैं कि जिनको तकदीर में अप्सरा खाली पेंसिल में ही मिलती है। But you all are lucky enough that you can really work it out with on the basis of information, knowledge about the market, knowledge about the overseas buyer. Today it's very, very easy. Those who have started their export 20 years, 35. I'm in the life for last 43 years. I remember to get the buyer's information in early days was how difficult it was. All senior people will endorse my view. Today it is not that. So you need to work it out. The market, technology has come, internet, speaking to the overseas buyer is as simple as buying a newspaper. No more difficult. So capitalize on that. You need to focus yourselves into the knowledge base, knowledge about the foreign trade policy, knowledge about customs, knowledge about the overseas. All these things, once you gather it and then convert that knowledge into operational knowledge. Friends, if you get one buyer and if you stick to your medium size, whatever it is, and dedication is the highest thing. There is no compromise, there is no substitute to hard work. How many of you are reading a newspaper? Which newspaper you are reading, madam?
लोक सत्ता।
लोक सत्ता। कितने साल से पढ़ रही हो? 10 साल, 15 साल? 20 years. 20 years. 20 years लोक सत्ता में आपने कभी भी ऐसा कोई न्यूज पढ़ा है कि कोई आदमी बहुत काम करने से मर गया? नहीं है. Fine. So this is a proof that hard work never makes you die. Only thing that you have to channelize it to the right direction. Friends, trust me. And if you don't want to, then also you have an option. 10% of the companies in India, you can do by the sir, what his sir has mentioned. You go by valuation, go by number of employees, go by the profit, whatever the parameter you select, your choice. Take the 10% of the Indian companies and see how they are in the upper bracket of 10%. To study the balance sheet, it will reveal that they are at the top 10% because they are into international market. Formula is very simple. If you also wanted to be successful story at your side, you wanted your signature become autograph, then it's very, very simple that you need to work for a global market, international market, which is full of opportunities. Friends, the way you want to do it, एक ही प्रोडक्ट पकड़ो, एक ही बायर पकड़ो, पहले स्टार्टिंग में मेहनत है. Export is not a part-time job. Many people are toying with an idea. It doesn't work. It requires a dedication. पहले 2 साल आपको करना है. 2 साल आपने डेडिकेटेड सिस्टमेटिकली अप्रोच कर दिया. ग्लोबल मार्केट में आपको 1 या 2 अच्छे बायर मिले. आप उनका जो एथिक्स, उनका रूल्स, उनकी गाइडलाइन को फॉलो करेंगे. फ्रेंड्स, wealth, the satisfaction level that will come. I will end with one of the example. There is a company in Nariman Point. I earlier used to give the name also, but somebody suggested avoid the name. So it's a company A. One of the managing director staying at Pedder Road, he was traveling in a flight. वो इंडिया से लंदन जा रहा था, तो को पैसेंजर जो उनके बाजू में था, होता है बहुत लंबी फ्लाइट है तो हम बात करना शुरू कर लेते हैं. ये जो इंडियन बंदा था, डायरेक्टर था कंपनी का, उन्होंने बाजू में एक यूरोपियन था, उनसे बात करना शुरू कर. सर, फ्रॉम विच कंट्री? इज इट योर फर्स्ट विजिट टू इंडिया? एक सिंपल कॉमन क्वेश्चन होता है, जैसे हम ओवरसीज में बोलते हैं, हम वेदर के बारे में बात करते हैं तो बात शुरू हो जाती है. इंडिया में क्रिकेट के बारे में पूछो तो बात शुरू हो. तो उसने पूछा, सर, इज इट योर फर्स्ट विजिट टू इंडिया? He said that, little rudely also, he said, this is the first and I hope it's the last. तो कुछ उनके दिल में था, वो लग रहा है उनकी बॉडी लैंग्वेज से. तो that fellow, our Indian director, felt little bit odd कि मुझे ये नहीं पूछना था, तो वो चुप हो गया. फिर जिसने बोला था वो ब्रिटिश को लगा कि उन्होंने थोड़ा बिहेवियर ठीक नहीं किया. And that gentleman was an elderly person. तो उन्होंने बोला sorry, क्या हो गया? Then the story started. मैं स्टोरी को थोड़ा कट करके आपको उसका मेन क्लिप समझा देता हूँ. ये ब्रिटिशर जो था, कोई इंडियन ने उनके साथ कम्युनिकेशन किया था, और वो जो ब्रिटिशर था उसको कुछ फार्मास्यूटिकल प्रोडक्ट, ऑइंटमेंट ही था, कोई मलम था, वो बनवाना था. तो वहाँ पे यूरोप में किसी वजह से उनकी जो कॉस्टिंग बैठ नहीं रही थी, तो उसने सोचा मैं इंडिया बनाऊंगा. तो उसने वो टाइम पे कुछ कम्युनिकेशन किया. इंडिया में कोई बंदा था, उसने अच्छी तरह से रिस्पॉन्ड किया, इतनी बड़ी बड़ी बातें की. So that fellow came into the clutch of him. He all the way came from London to India just to negotiate, to discuss with him. पर जैसे होता है ना कालबा देवी में एक टेबल होता है और उसके ऊपर लिखा है so and so meal. That table is a meal. You know, तो इस तरह का वो जो बंदा आया, उनसे बात की, तो there was nothing substance, and that fellow has no other option but to go back empty-handed. तो ऑब्वियसली उनको फीलिंग तो होगा ही होगा कि ये मेरे साथ चीटिंग हुआ. ये पूरी उसने बात बता दी, बहुत इमोशनली बताया. अभी देखिए where the opportunity lies. ये आप यदि उनकी जगह पे होता तो आप थोड़ी सिंपैथी कर देते थे, थोड़ा ज्यादा अपने पैट्रियटिज्म होता, आप थोड़ा उनका बचाव करते थे, उनके बारे में अच्छा बोल देता था. उन्होंने नहीं किया. उन्होंने से can I take a liberty of talking further now business? क्या बनाना है आपको? ये जो बंदा है वो मर्चेंट एक्सपोर्टर है और फार्मास्यूटिकल का उनको बिल्कुल नॉलेज नहीं है, पर कंडला में एक प्लॉट उनके पास पड़ा. तो उसने बोला कि कैन आई टेक फर्दर डिस्कशन इन ऑन बिजनेस, और फिर उसने हाँ बोला. तो उसने बातों बातों में बोला कि मुझे ये कर, वो बोला मैं करके देता हूँ, my fellow brother at DPO, I will take it responsibility on mine, और मैं आपको आपकी टर्म्स के ऊपर करके दूंगा. बात में जो जान होती है वो हो ही जाती है. उनको पता लगा कि ये सही बंदा है, उनसे बात करने में काम बनेगा मेरा. सब बातें करने लगा. अभी देखो जो इंडियन डायरेक्टर था उनको थोड़ा बिजनेस कैलकुलेशन था, गुजरात में बिजनेस कैलकुलेशन था, उसको कैलकुलेट करना था कि मेरा इन्वेस्टमेंट कितना लगेगा। उन्होंने एक ही सवाल पूछा कि आप जो बता रहे हो वो मैं बनाऊंगा, खाली आप मुझे एक आइडिया दे दो कि आप हर महीने कितना माल लोगे, कितनी ट्यूब्स लोगे। उन्होंने जवाब नहीं दिया, ये ब्रिटिशर ने जवाब नहीं दिया। तो ये जो इंडियन डायरेक्टर था, उनको लगा कि मेरा सवाल उन्होंने क्लियरली नहीं सुना, तो ही रिपीटेड कि सर आई कैन डू फॉर यू द वे यू रिक्वायर, बट आई जस्ट वांट टू नो व्हाट क्वांटिटी यू विल बाय। सो दैट ही वांटेड टू कैलकुलेट कितना मशीन लगेगा, क्या लगेगा, यू नो, बैकवर्ड कैलकुलेशन। तो भी उन्होंने जवाब नहीं दिया। फिर उसने तीसरी दफा, सर इट इज necessary for me to know, to say yes or no to you finally right now. I just wanted to have the volume, quantum known to me. And the friend, the answer of that Britisher should be your takeaway for today. The answer was, I will buy the quantity you can manufacture. That is the quantity. That is the quantity I am looking at it. Then I just wanted to say, this is the exports. Friends, खाई होगी अगर ठोकर हमने किसी मंजिल से, खाई होगी ठोकर यदि हमने किसी पत्थरों से मंजिल का निशानी पाएंगे हम उसी पत्थर से। Thank you very much.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, now let's move ahead, and I would like to invite our last guest, Advocate Khushnuma Khan. And the topic that she is going to speak on is commercial contracts and delayed payment. Can I please have you here, ma'am?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for giving me a patient hearing now. Thank you, sir, my co-speakers, and thank you, SME, for giving me this surprise invite. I was really not aware that I will be being called upon to come to close the session, and when I am called upon, then it's my duty to and as a responsibility to maintain the flow of the event. At the same time, I was a little confused that what should be the topic I'm speaking about, because as I said, this is a surprise invite to me. But then as I was thinking about it, and I told SME Zeenat that since we are talking about on exports, so let me talk on commercial contracts and the delayed payments, that everybody is very interested when I come and speak on the dais to know about delayed payments. So to take this forward, we are all business people. Some professionals are sitting here, some business people are sitting, there are a huge crowd of manufacturers here. If I put a question to you, can anybody tell me in their own language, what do you mean when you say that I am into a business? What do you mean by the term business? Can anybody define that? Yes?
Buying and selling.
Okay. And? Yes? Generating activities, good. And sorry, profit generating activities. Right. Can somebody pass the mic, please? Can we have the mic, please, for the audience? Yes.
Any task undertaken with the purpose of making profit is the business.
Okay. Anybody else? So I understand that it's buying and selling. 2, it's profit making. That is all. That's a part of it. Buying and selling and making profit is a part of it. The major and the primary definition, if I give you today, is this: why is one required to do a business? Is to earn a livelihood. That's the purpose for all of us, isn't it? Yes or no? Why do we do a business? I mean, just to make profits, of course. We are not here doing business to make profits, or we are not here to just buy and sell. So the main primary reasons for anybody to do any services or any work or any profession or any business is to earn a livelihood for yourself and your family. When we say that business, So, if I take you back to several of lakhs of years before, I have heard, or rather I have learnt in my school, as well as I have heard from my grandfather, my father, that in primitive ages, there was business. In fact, people doing business since lakhs of years before, businesses were there. But at that time, the businesses were on barter. People used to exchange their goods to run their livelihood. If I have something, I will exchange for the others, whatever I would need. And they would travel from place to place, several weeks or months together to do a barter for the products what they have. Today, today it is termed as exports, because you sit here at your place, in your country, in your destination, and you can send your goods to any part of the world through whatever means, through ship, through air, through train, whatever means are available, you can send your goods across. So that is what is called exports. Ultimately, it is a part of a business. Now these exports, earlier when people used to do exports, as I said, it was barter. There was no document which used to occur. People are present over there. They would see, they would check out who is in need of what, and what is the need of the person who is in requirement. So two people will match their requirements, and on basis of matching their requirements, they would exchange their products, even whether it is domestic or international, both ways. That scenario has changed now. I mean, it may have changed for several years now. The exports is into existence for several years now. Maybe how many years? I don't know. Maybe many years. So that is what. Currently, it has become more and more advanced because of the technology. There is one important thing which has taken place, and the change has been brought when banks have come into existence. When you send your goods from your port of destination, from your port of embarkation to your port of disembarkation, there are documents which are called bill of lading and your negotiable instrument, which you send through your bankers, your authorized lending bankers, to your consignees, for him to get hold of the consignment which is sent by you, against which he has to make the payment. Most of the time it happens so that either the delivery is on payment or the delivery is at site. There is a credit, there is a certain period of credit which is offered by the exporters to the consignees to make the payment. So, and most of the times it is seen that the payments are either delayed or payments are not coming. If the payments are not coming, then do what? If the payments are delayed, then to do what? Because every one of you who is an exporter over here would vouch to themselves, not to me. Each one of you, manufacturer, exporters, whatever, each one of you have a lending facility with the bank. Each one of you have a discounted facility with the bank to your bills, which you have to ultimately pay to the bank with interest. In those circumstances, when you see that there is a default of your consignee, your payments are not coming, then you do what? We had speakers on policies, insurance policies, we had speakers on banks who are providing facilities. That's all good. That's the way the exports are and the businesses are enhanced. But ultimately, what is more important is what happens to the payment that you have done? What happens to the recovery that you have to do? If you are not able to do the recoveries, how are you going to pay your financiers, your creditors, right? The banks are not only your creditors are those markets people who have given you the product to create the raw material to create a product. Am I right? I am not from a businesswoman. I am not an exporter. I am a pure legal advisor. But whatever I know, a little bit of our business, I am trying to share with you. In such circumstances, what has happened is, in foreign countries, whenever any transaction, whether domestic or international happens, it has become mandatory for them to execute a contract. They execute a contract, the parties bind themselves under a contract, which somewhere or the other in India, it's not very happening. I mean, people are still very scared or skeptical about entering into a contract, especially, I would say, SMEs. If you ask them, do you have a contract? They say no. We are just doing on purchase, and most of the time, even for domestic, they don't have a purchase order. They say no, it was just on a word of mouth, and the delivery challenge that the goods have, they just have exchanged the goods or they have supplied the goods. Understand a situation where, in circumstances where you are supplying your goods, you don't have a contract with you, and your payments are defaulted. What do you do? If there is a foreigner to whom you have out of good faith sent your goods, your payments have not been received, you have line of creditors, your bankers, everybody coming upon you, and you are not able to make the payment because your payments you have not received, on the basis of which you have taken a facility, or you have taken the worth or the trust of your creditors from the market to supply to you certain raw materials for which you are making an end product and giving to your customers outside India. There are many situations, and there are n number of situations which have taken place where the exporters have not received their payment. How do you do? I get many such queries that and calls that how to handle these situations. First is this: your exporter or your importer is not an Indian. So if you feel to, or if you even imagine to file proceedings against that person, you have to go into another country, which obviously you will not be willing, because the amount that you have to recover, double the amount you have to expend to recover that money. That doesn't make any sense. It is advised that every exporter, whether it is in India or outside, they should have a contract, a proper commercial contract, which before even you enter or you start production, there should be a negotiation. After negotiation, you should have your contract. In your contract, you have to have your commercials very clear. Your timeline has to be very clear. The most important thing is that the arbitration clause. Now, why I am emphasizing on I will explain why arbitration clause I emphasize, and it is important, is this: the world business, because there are different jurisdictions of different countries, the world business on contracts, commercial contracts, have come to this conclusion that if there is a dispute between two parties who are not within the same jurisdiction or even within the same jurisdiction, then there has to be certain legal principles which is binding upon them. That legal principle has come out to be an informal legal statute, which is arbitration. So if you have arbitration in your contracts, wherever you are, you can invoke that arbitration and you can compel the other party to make the payment, because now any award which is passed in arbitration is executable. Suppose today in India, you have a buyer who has defaulted and you take him to the court, you file a proceedings, there is an order which you get from the court. Now you don't know what is to be done with that order, because you are happy you have their order. That is all what you have, that you have an order, you feel happy that, oh, I have the order against that person. Now, but do you ever know that what you have to do with that order? Nobody knows. That order needs to be executed in the court of law to enforce it upon the other person to get the payments. So therefore, to enforce your payment against a foreign buyer, you need to have some sort of judicial or legal machinery in your hand, through which you can compel the recovery of the payment. Right or wrong, sir? Am I right or wrong? Loudly. Thank you. So therefore, arbitration has become, over a period of time, over a decade, arbitration has become very important in all the commercial contracts, especially for contracts which are foreign contracts. There are international arbitrations which are happening. There are several judgments. You must have recently read the judgments of Amazon, and it was big time in news, the arbitration, emergency arbitration, and how it was invoked and how it was recognized by the Supreme Court of India. So that was an international arbitration. Because of that arbitration, Amazon could impose or enforce its rights over the Future Group and Reliance and all that, right? Imagine if it were not having all these arbitration, and what would, such clauses, then what would happen to it, the contract? Nothing. It would have lost the money, and big time money. So this is important as you as a manufacturer, as you as an exporter, to have such binding contracts and clauses with your foreign buyers, so that little would you have a trouble in recovery of your monies, right? Coming to a flip side of it, like second part of it, delayed payment. Now we will talk about delayed payment. I think everybody knows here what is Samadhan and how you have to do Samadhan. I don't have to go into all that. Everybody knows here. What is missing in Samadhan is every SME, the moment they see that, okay, my payments are delayed, I am not receiving the payments, they file an application with the portal. And after filing the application, there is nothing which is happening beyond that. After some time, the application gets dismissed. And then they start running around that, oh, the application is got dismissed, there is no response. Now what to do? Every application which is filed, there is a process. And that process needs to be followed. If you don't follow that process, the application, merely filing of application, is not going to give you your recovery money. There is a process which has to be followed. There are several, there are verifications which happen, there are documents which need to be followed, there are hearings which take place, there are several things which happens. So, merely just don't file the application, you have to follow the process. And if you don't follow the process, please, you may be having your own lawyers who can support you in this. There is a very recent judgment which has come, which has been decided by the NCLT Rajasthan, and the judgment is, I was very happy after reading the judgment, and I thought that this judgment is some way it can help the SMEs. It was the judgment, there was some contractor who has filed a case against the Rajasthan company which was owned by the government of Rajasthan and state government of Rajasthan and government of India. And the case was filed against them for the recovery of the payments under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in the NCLT, Jaipur. So there was the argument that it's a government company, so the IBC proceedings does not apply to the government companies. The court has, NCLT Jaipur, has held that even the companies which are held by, 50% of the companies which are held by the state government or the union government and which are within the meaning of the Companies Act of India, they are susceptible of coming within the purview of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So even the government company can be declared insolvent and there can be IRP against the government company. So besides, when you have to really have a calculative move, when there is a recovery of payments to see either from the government or from an individual, that what route you have to choose the best. Whether you go before the insolvency and bankruptcy, whether you take the MSMEs or whether you go under the arbitration. Recently there was a High Court judgment where High Court has held that if there is an arbitration clause, the MSME Facilitation Council cannot adjudicate upon it. So there has been various issues which has been coming up when you come to the legal position. But what I want to make you aware of this, before taking any step forward or before taking any decision, it is very, very essential for SMEs, every SME, to have a legal opinion, which is very important. If you would go with me, every SME today or every successful business or business house that we today were once a startup and then an MSME and then today a successful business house. They all have gone through these two stages. So you are at stage 2. All those SMEs who are here are at stage 2. It is very important for you to always have the advisor, as Salunke sir has in his initial speech in the morning, he said that it's very important to have 4 pillars and one of the pillars is your advisors. So it's very important for all SMEs to have your advisor, a financial advisor, a legal advisor or a company secretary, whatever advisors you have. It's very important because the next step that you see is a lead for you, is going to a boom for you. You are not going to remain SME forever. Why are you SME today? Because of course you want to go one step ahead. You are not going to remain where you are today. And that's not the life. You cannot be stagnant. As Ajit sir just now said that you have to move ahead. You have to move. You have to go beyond. You can't be stagnant at one place. So if you can't be stagnant to one place, then you have to understand that today you are an SME. Before that you were a startup. Now you are an SME. Now your next step is ahead. Now that step you have to take. But for taking that step, there are some other things also which you need to do. You have to first equip yourself with all those valuable issues and valuable principles which will help you or enhance you in reaching the next step. So, this is all about, I needed to have a little discussion on you because as I said that I am an surprise invitee to speak and I have to do the honor. So if you have any questions to me, please go ahead. I will rather be happy in answering the questions. Or